Welcome to HTB, or How to Become, the podcast where careers start with a conversation. Each episode, we sit down with someone actually doing the job you're curious about, from trades to tech, healthcare to hands-on skilled work. You'll hear how they got started, what the day-to-day really looks like, what they earn, and what they wish they'd known before they began. Whether you're a student, a parent, or someone thinking about a career change, these real stories are here to help you figure out your next step. Let's jump into today's conversation and learn how to become, well, anything. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Bernard Peters. Today, we're sitting down with Dan Labrass to look at the career of a vocational rehabilitation counselor, the professional who helps people with physical or mental conditions prepare for, get, and keep meaningful employment. In the U.S., vocational rehab counselors typically earn somewhere in the $45,000 to mid-$70,000 range when they first start, with experienced specialists and those in higher paying systems or private practice earning up to $200,000 plus a year. Most roles start with a bachelor's degree in something like psychology, counseling, social work, or rehabilitation, and many employers now prefer or require a master's degree, plus national credentials such as the Certified Rehabilitation Counselor, which means several years of graduate study, supervised hours, and a licensing exam. The workforce skews heavily female. Over 70% of vocational rehabilitation counselors are women, and the average age is in the mid-40s, reflecting a field where experience and long-term client relationships really matter. After speaking with Dan, it is clear that this is an incredibly rewarding career. If you're drawn to counseling, advocacy, and practical job-focused problem-solving, this episode will walk you through what it takes to become a Voc Rehab counselor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bernard.
I'm your host, Bernard Peters, and today I'm sitting with Dan Labrass, who's going to tell us all about how to become a vocational rehabilitation counselor.
Gladly. Yeah, I'm glad to be on your show, Bernard. I'm kind of honored in a way. Not a lot of people are that interested in what vocational rehabilitation counselors do.
Dan, I think a lot of people don't even know what it is.
Yeah, that's true.
I think maybe to start, would you mind just explaining to the audience what a vocational rehab counselor does?
Yes. Well, I think the word rehabilitation throws a lot of people off. And in a way, it's habilitation because you're helping people get back on track and get their lives in order and help them get a job. And, a lot of what we do in society is based on what we do for a job. Can you make money? Can you make a living? Are you making the place better? Are you just making money to stay alive? Or are you making money because you have a passion about something? And so as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, I'm primarily working with people that have injuries and disabilities towards employment. With that aspect, there's like a perceived barrier to employment, mostly to be eligible for the services, because then we get money for training and whatnot. And if you have a disability towards employment, then you're qualified for vocational rehabilitation services. Now, there's two sides to it. One is a public voc rehab, which I used to work. It's for the state of Alaska for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. So each state has federal funds to do vocational rehabilitation. It came from the end of World War II when so many vets came back and they had disabilities. So they set up a vocational rehabilitation program to help the vets get back and, get on their feet and stuff. And to this day, the vets have a vocational rehabilitation. And I access some of those services sometimes. But then that branched out to, what about other people? What about blind people, deaf people, that have cognitive impairments and psychological impairments, mental health impairments? There's all sorts of conditions that can inhibit your ability to get work. Mm-hmm. So we come up against those barriers. My approach to it as a vocational rehabilitation counselor has been to try to change the perception of those situations, because as soon as somebody sees you like in a wheelchair or they see you using sign language or something, they think all hell's broke loose and you're retarded and you can't even tie your shoes,
Yeah.
And I remember this episode with Yo-Yo Man. I think it was in a wheelchair or something, and they thought, he couldn't talk, and they were talking to his aide, and he's a brilliant celloist,
Right.
And, he's just a very accomplished musician, but just because he was using a wheelchair, they didn't think he could do anything.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's the perception that's out there in society a lot. And so a lot of my effort in vocational rehabilitation is to change those perceptions in society, to show people that, it's largely psychological in my view. I mean, I think people that I worked with a young lady up in Alaska who was in a serious car accident, almost died, broke her neck, and she was paralyzed from the neck down.
Yeah.
And up until then, she hadn't done a lot with her life, and she was only like 17, 18 years old when this happened. So she was a young woman. And she finally got really focused. She was so happy to be alive, and all of a sudden, we better do something, and she could barely move her hands, and she was in a wheelchair and needed, 24/7 care assistance. But her mind was good.
Yeah.
Her mind was strong.
Right.
So she went to college. She got a master's degree in psychology. Next thing I know, she's writing grants for the university. Next thing I know, she's heading up a department for the university.
That's
She was a
neat.
Native woman, so she was, setting an example for the other Native people that, here you guys are kind of crying poverty and whatnot. And look at me. I can just move my head. I put a cursor on my forehead and work a computer, and
Wow.
boom, I can get a master's degree and be writing grants and be a leader in the community.
So what was your role with that particular
Well, I
client?
was the voc rehab counselor with the state of Alaska at that point,
Yep.
so I kinda came in a little bit late on the situation. They already had her in school. She was already doing really good stuff, and so I just what was tricky about it was that she still needed a lot of support services. She still needed live-in care. She needed, people giving her rides, and so that kind of stuff is very expensive, and to navigate the systems like Social Security benefits and, the services that those would cover those, typically it says, "Don't work," and they'll pay for everything, but if
Yeah.
you work and you make a salary, then you start eating into, "Well, you don't qualify for this because you make too much money."
Right.
And that's the systems almost work against, this person going to work. And I think that's part of our challenge is that the bureaucracies kind of overlap sometimes and they fight against each other. And so to
Yeah.
get
Right.
the benefits that you need to live and have, in-home care and transportation so you can get to work, that doesn't allow you to. So I find a lot of people that are like getting on Social Security and whatnot, mainly because they need medical benefits.
Yep. Okay.
And without medical benefits, they can't work. But once they get medical benefits, they can work. But then if they go back to work, they lose their medical benefits.
Right.
So it can
Yeah,
be a
it's a vicious cycle.
catch-22.
And so with this particular client, how were you introduced to this? Did they have to reach out to you? Were they working with the state and then the state recommended you? How did that work?
Yeah, there was a whole team of people involved in this. I
Yep.
mean, because you have you have all the medical aspects and the medical concerns, so you have that part of it. And typically, both rehab counselors work as part of a team. I kind of see ourselves in a way as the hub of the team because you got medical people dealing with medical concerns. You've got the parents, the family, the normal support you have. If there's an employer involved, you're working with the employer. If there's an educational institution, you're working with the educational institution.
Yeah.
And you're figuring out ways to make everything work together. You have to
Mhm.
coordinate all this stuff. It can't just be like independent, they're going to off in this corner doing that. Everybody has to talk to each other,
Right.
and so you have to know, you have to be a full-blown plan. And more recently, from our own experience, dealing with Craig Hospital in Denver,
Yeah.
which is, a great place, and they would have everybody come in. I mean, they had the nurses, the physical therapists, they had the dentist in there, they
Right.
had the psychologist,
Everybody. Yeah.
everybody,
That was
and the
amazing.
benefit experts that can deal with Social Security. They
Yeah.
had a full team. There was like 20 or 30 people in the room. I was so impressed on how many people they had for a team.
Yeah.
But that's really what it takes. It's kind of like you have to hit all angles of this. You can't leave anything out because one cog missing in the wheel, and the wheel could crash.
Right.
And so you got to keep everything kind of rolling and stay on top of that. But that's what a voc rehab counselor does. Is we're looking to make people as independent as possible by them working and making an income.
Yeah.
In this day and age, there's a huge perception of, if you can make your own way through life and support yourself, then you're going to be much more valued in the community.
I think you also find a lot more value in yourself, right? You feel like you have a purpose.
Yes,
You can contribute.
that's
It's really important.
it is. It's an important aspect of who we are as people in our
Yeah.
society.
And I can only imagine how an injury, be it from, some kind of activity you're doing or from work, and that becoming debilitating, I can imagine just how that can impact your life, right? You
Has a
can't do
really
your job
significant
anymore.
yeah, it has a really significant impact
Yeah.
on life. You're kinda getting at people when they're going through pivotal transition. I mean, they're having to accept that they have limitations now, and It was like when I went skiing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to the top of the mountain and ski down, and oh my god, the reality of that hit me. It was like, "No, no, go to the bunny slope, ski on the bunny slope, get
Yeah,
those
get your
skis
feet
back
in.
under you, get used to it, and then,
Yeah,
be within your limitations,
right,
and then start pushing the limitations
right.
out." And then so that's the process we go through in Voc Rehab is, okay, now you have to accept new limitations. You can't do XYZ like you used to do and used to make a lot of money doing it, and, especially in Alaska where I work, it's mostly, truck drivers and equipment operators and construction workers, and they're all, they're doing heavy
Oh,
duty
very
stuff out,
physical
very physical
physical
work.
work, yeah,
And then, they fall or they slip off off of the crane or something, and man, they get smashed up, and then they're got an orthopedic condition, and then they
and
got a
they've got a
permanent.
whole family to support.
Yeah, yeah. They got families to support. They were making good money in the construction industry. All of a sudden, they lose that. And then they come to us and they say, "Oh my God, what can we do?"
Yeah,
And, I've had some very successful plans, reemployment training. I mean, is what we do. We train people to get, I try to get them back up to earning as much as they can towards what they were doing. I
right,
mean, that's the goal. Unfortunately, the statistics don't bear that out, but I always try to get people earning as much money as they possibly can.
right. So, what first drew you to the field, and when did it click that helping people find a way back to work was
My goal,
your
yeah.
goal or your career focus?
Well, my first when I was in high school and whatnot, I was pretty good at math, and I liked computers. And I was back in
Yeah,
the age in the '70s when computers were like punch cards,
right.
just coming on the scene. So I got into computers. That was my first thing out of high school. Was, oh, I'm going to get into computers and make a lot of money working on computers. And I did that. I got an associate degree in data processing, and then I went and I got a job at Hamilton Test Systems, and I was working with Otis Elevator, and we were programming the computers that run the elevators up and down automatically, and all
Yeah,
that kind of neat
yeah,
stuff. And I was working next to all kinds of PhD and master level engineers and doing the same kind of work they were doing, and I
yeah.
thought was fascinating. But I found that my interaction with the people and helping the people, I was more of a people person because just working with the computers was a little bit, and it kind of gets sterile, and it's not
Right.
as enticing to me. In solving, mechanical engineering things is challenging, but I was more of the people person. And so then when I moved to Alaska. I started going to school for computers because I had an associate degree. I figured I'd keep going to school for computers. But while I was going to school for computers, I got a job at a rehab center, the Fairbanks Resource Agency. That was my first job.
And that was just trying to make ends meet while you were in school.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
just trying to say, I ran into a friend of mine and he said, "Oh, meet me at the bar." And he interviewed me for the job.
No way.
Yeah. And I got a job being an itinerant counselor, they called it.
Yep.
And I walked into this rehab center and it was like a sheltered workshop kind of setting. And they had people standing with blocks and doing all kinds of, kind of meaningless stuff for the most part. But they had a bunch of adults that were fairly independent and living out in the community, but they needed support services. They needed somebody helping them with their budgeting, their shopping, recreational activities, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I literally designed a program to do that. There was a young guy who was the executive director. I never forget. I remember walking in, and this young guy's there. He's like, "Yeah, we're starting a new thing where we're trying to get people to be as independent as possible." So there was a push to get people to be
And what
independent.
types of people were these?
We're people with developmental disabilities.
Gotcha. Yep.
So it was mostly cognitive, impairments and stuff like that. But there
Yep.
was one man there who was a deaf man, and he was labeled with a cognitive disability. He didn't have language skills,
Yeah.
and he probably had a little bit of limitations there. But he was with four other guys living in this apartment, and he was fixing everybody's bicycles, and he was taking care of the place, and he was cooking. He had a chalkboard and he kept writing words on the chalkboard, but I soon realized that he didn't really know what most of the words meant. He knew how to write them, he knew the mechanics of the words, but he didn't know I would say, why did you do that? And the why, never clicked. He could not answer me a why question. So I
Yeah.
say, what are you doing? Well, what he could get, or what is your name? He could get that. If I said, who are you? He would not be able to tell me.
Yeah.
So he had bits and pieces of a language structure, but he didn't have it all, and it affected how he thought and saw the world.
Yep.
And I thought, this guy has a lot of potential, but we don't know how to access it.
Yeah.
That's what my impression was of that
Love that.
situation.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? I started to research it, and I thought, okay, he's deaf. Let's look at what options deaf people do. And all of a sudden became in contact with a whole deaf community up there of people, families, mothers and fathers with kids,
Yep.
working jobs, doing this and that. And there was a deaf club there. And I started working with him, saying, "You're deaf," and he said, "I know, I can't hear anything." And he would go to church and he would pray to God to become a hearing person. And I
Yeah.
thought,
So sad.
ooh. So I said, "Come with me. We're going to go to the deaf club." And they'd be telling stories about hunting moose and doing all kinds of stuff in American Sign Language. The pivotal moment in his life when he just kind of bloomed after this was he realized, he said, "I'm a deaf person. I use sign language. I can use sign language.
Yeah.
I don't need to talk or
Right.
hear."
Yeah,
And
I'm
so
no
he
longer.
said, "I want the house with the picket fence and the car and everything." And so once he realized that he was a deaf person, he didn't have to become a hearing person to be part of mankind, so to speak, to be
Right.
part of society, that he could do what he wanted. And he got his driver's license. We bought a pickup truck. We built a camper on his pickup truck. He'd go all over the place. And then he got a job at Beaver Sports, the local bike shop.
Yeah, I remember that place.
Yeah, this guy worked there for 25 years. He just
No
now
way.
retired last year. They had a big retirement. He worked there longer than anybody else worked at that place. He was so reliable. He would show up every day. He would do anything they asked him to do. He was putting bikes together. He was making skis. He's out there shoveling the parking lot. He was just a worker.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to make something of his life. And I still see him around. I see him. He goes to the library and uses the computers. He still, still has communication problems, but he signs all the time. He signs with people. He lets them know he's a signing person. They try to write him notes and stuff. And his language skills improved significantly once he realized that, I don't have to do all this writing stuff or words and dictionaries. I can do sign language and use facial expression and mime. And he would see other deaf people. And he was pretty much accepted into the deaf community as a deaf person.
That's amazing. Okay, so you met him while you were in school for computer science.
Computer science, yeah.
And then how did it progress from there?
Well, I got a bachelor's degree in computer science.
Okay.
And unfortunately, from there, I couldn't find a job in computer science.
Yeah, and
I was already working as a
Fairbanks,
rehab counselor, kind of,
right.
And I said, "Wow, this is kind of." I was like split. I was part of me was a computer programmer, which was helpful. There's helpful stuff about that,
For sure.
but I couldn't find a job because all the jobs at that time seemed to be like in business and banking and accounting and computers with accounting and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have any background on that. The work I had done earlier at Hamilton Test Systems was scientific computer program.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of opportunity for that where I was.
Yep.
But I was working as a rehab counselor, and I had been in contact with the deaf community, and I was learning American Sign Language and having a great time with it. And the interesting thing about that was I didn't know why I learned American Sign Language so easily. And when I look back at my upbringing, when I was a little kid, I was the oldest one in our family, and my parents only spoke French to me.
That's right. Yeah.
So the French was like ingrained way back in there, which is very closely related to American Sign Language because American Sign Language came from France.
Is that right?
And so when I realized that American Sign Language and French are very closely related, and somehow it's like falling off a log for me, it worked. And I never really got the French back, but I got the American Sign Language back.
Yeah.
And so then I pursued a master's degree because I knew I had a bachelor's degree. It wasn't getting me a job. And if I wanted to go forward in rehab, and get certified and whatnot, I needed to get a master's degree. So I selected to go to Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And I moved the whole family back east to stay at my parents' house.
And how long did that master's degree take you?
Well, it took me a full year back there, and then I did an internship. I came back to Alaska and did an internship in the Voc Rehab in Anchorage for summer, which kind of got me back into the state. And I commuted back and forth. I had our homestead in Fairbanks, and so I moved the family back to the homestead, and I commuted to Anchorage to do my internship. And every weekend, it was kind of like where my parents were living in East Hartford, Connecticut, and I was going to school at Gallaudet. I would go from Gallaudet to Connecticut, the same distance almost as Anchorage to Fairbanks, except the traffic was far worse.
Oh, worse than Fairbanks to Anchorage, or worse than
Fairbanks to Anchorage was like a beautiful view of Mount McKinley and stuff.
It's gorgeous.
And here I'm driving through New Jersey and New York, and it was a hoot. But
So you had to get a master's in order to get licensed.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't have to. I think people are able to get certain credentials now with a bachelor's degree and good work experience working
Okay.
under somebody. I wanted to get the master's degree because I knew that there was another layer to this, which is what
Yep.
I'm kind of moving towards. There's another layer to voc rehab work because there's the public voc rehab work, which is working for the state and
Yep.
working for the nonprofits like I was doing, and I ran a nonprofit for about 8 years as well.
Mhm.
So there was that public aspect of it, but then there's a private aspect of it, which is where you're working with workers' comp and insurance companies
Yep.
where you're helping, people that are injured on jobs and then they're trying, they have workers' comp benefits because all employers are required to have that. And you help them get back into the workforce. And so
Yep.
it's a much broader picture of it.
And that's private now. You're no longer working for the state.
Yeah, I switched about 17 years ago. I started my own business. And probably about 20 years ago, I went into private rehab because I wasn't moving up the ladder enough in the public sector
Right.
to where I felt like there was some place for me to go.
What uh, um what does licensing look like? What does that whole process look like? So do you have to um you have to take multiple exams? Is it different in each state? How does all that work?
No, it's a national certification,
Okay.
the CRCC, the Council on Rehabilitation Counseling Certification. And it's a pretty daunting process because after I got the master's degree, I wanted to jump right in and take the test,
Mhm.
but I still got the study guides and I still studied my butt off. It's about an 8-hour test. eh,
Wow.
You know,
In one sitting?
well, I think maybe 4 hours. I might be exaggerating. It might be a
Yeah.
4-hour test, but it's a pretty daunting test.
Wow, I can
I mean, it
imagine.
was very, very involved because it dealt with if you think about voc rehab, there's a whole spectrum of it. There's the public sector, there's working for nonprofits, there's working with a variety of different types of disabilities and situations
Yep.
and funding sources. And so they have to cover the whole thing. And I wanted to, I got study guides and I took the test and I passed it first, right
That's
off
great.
because I knew that was the key because once you pass that test, then you can bill to insurance companies.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's a key thing to get
Right.
that CRC is a critical thing. And like in the state of Alaska, if you're a certified rehab counselor, allows me to get referrals from the Division of Workers' Comp. So I get state referrals, the mandatory referrals. If you're out of work for 120 days, it's a
Mhm.
mandatory referred to a voc rehab counselor. And first, we do an evaluation to see if you can go back to your job of
Right.
injury. That's the first thing we do. If we cover that base, if you can't, there's a good chance you're eligible for reemployment training. If that we get to that next phase of it, then we write a reemployment training plan and try to get you back into the workforce.
Okay. And so for young and upcoming voc rehab counselors, what's kind of the typical degree that they get for their bachelor's, and what type of degree do they get for their master's?
I think there's the straight you can get degrees in voc rehab or
Yeah.
rehab counseling. You can get a bachelor's and a master's.
Hmm.
I had a bachelor's in computer science, but
Right.
then I had 8 years of experience working for that
Right.
nonprofit. So Gallaudet was pretty happy to take me in.
Yep.
I sent them videos and they did all kinds of evaluations with me for sign language and stuff like that because it was also that part that I was going to a college that was primarily deaf people.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like a reverse world if you think about it.
Yeah.
And we live in a hearing world. Well, think of a world where it's all deaf people.
Right.
I'd go to job interviews, there'd be 3 deaf people signing to me, asking me questions in sign language, respond in sign language. Everything was opposite. I had to survive in an environment that was based on your skill in American Sign Language.
Right.
And the other thing about that too was I was 30 years old when I went back to college.
Yep.
I realized this is what I realized was that and I kind of realized this early on, even with computer science, that employers are happy to have you come in and do the full line of work that everybody else is doing. But if you don't have the paper, the credentials, you
Yep.
won't get paid the same salary.
Right.
So to me, it was like, I need to get the master's degree. I need to get the certification. And it really opened a lot of doors. Getting the master's degree opened all kinds of doors
Yeah.
for me. It was really a big move.
Yeah. I feel like financially things really opened up for you when you started your own business.
Yes, yes, that was a big step, and it was a real turning point in my life, um, because what had happened was I was working for a private rehab firm, and I was
Mm.
a partner, and I was gaining more ownership of the company
Yep.
the longer I worked, because the initial partner had pulled me in and said, "We'll give you 10% every, more ownership of the company." And
Yep.
so I thought, "Oh, that's cool." And I was getting dividends and, um, other benefits from that. And so working in a firm, and I was also supervising all the other rehab counselors. There was 4 of us in there.
Yep.
That was a good kind of learning ground to do that, because if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have had as good a sense of how to do this stuff.
Right.
So I worked there for 4 years, and then, the original owner, he had a heart attack. He wasn't very healthy, and he sold his majority shares to some, young guy out of Anchorage, and that person came up, and I was working with them. We were getting along pretty well initially, but then a few months in, he decided they were kind of watching me and seeing how I was doing it, because I was pretty much running the show. I mean, I
Yeah.
was supervising everybody, and I was handling the caseload. And the interesting thing about that situation was that as the rehab counselor, I have my credentials and my certification. So
Yep.
the state sends the referrals to me to my license. But as working for a
Gotcha.
company, I'm overseeing a whole group of rehab counselors that are getting cases sent to their credentials.
Yep.
And so this new guy came in. He didn't have the credentials. He was a business person. He knew how to run a business and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the cases were primarily in my name.
Yeah.
I was like the the one with the wall, the document on the wall that says you can get referrals from the state of Alaska.
Yep.
So I had a lot of the cases in my name, and so when we came to shove, they wanted to run everything, and we were starting to butt heads a little bit on how to run the cases, and they were my cases. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to let you tell me how to run my cases. So
Yeah.
push came to shove, and they ended up firing me because they had majority shares. And I soon came to realize that as a partner, unless you have over 50% shares, you have nothing.
Right.
You really have
Yeah.
nothing. And that's
Yeah.
what the reality was. And I had been speaking with an attorney before that,
Mm.
because I kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Yep.
And she said, "Well, these cases are all in your name,
And
on
all
your
belong to
license,
you.
and
Yeah.
here, let's start an LLC, and
Yep.
boom." And so what went from, "Oh, I'm fired and I'm looking for work as a dorm counselor for $12 an hour," or something ridiculous,
Yeah.
to, "Oh, wait, I all of a sudden have the biggest caseload for Voc Rehab, private sector
Yeah.
Voc Rehab in the state overnight." And
Wow.
I know it. And I was working out of my home, and the office environment had become so toxic, and I spent most of my time, dealing with feuds between office personnel and
It's
this
so
folk
hard.
rehab
Yeah.
counselor and
It's
that
so
one, and they
hard.
disagree, and they're all fighting about stupid stuff. And I spent a lot of energy kind of keeping things, focused and moving ahead in terms
Yep.
of getting our work done. Um, so I didn't even want to have an office. I just want to work out of my home. And then I had my assistant; she was working out of her home. And then the next thing you know, I had all these cases, so I had more assistants.
Yeah.
I got more assistants. Everybody was working out of their homes. We set up like a little cottage industry of Oak rehab counselors working out of our
I
homes.
love that.
And we'd come in over. We'd have a staffing meeting over at my kitchen table. We did that for a while, because it just felt a lot better. Everybody was getting along a lot better, and I didn't have
Yeah.
to worry about their equipment or their computers. I set up everything. I had a lot of good support from the Small Business Administration.
Okay.
They set me up with a database system that was all online, so I could keep all my files
Oh,
online, so
wow.
everybody could access everything
Cool.
remotely, which is
Yeah.
still to this day, how we're all set up now. We're
Yeah.
all access things remotely. And so that helped a lot. Yeah, once I started my own business and I was able to run it and make the decisions and call the shots, I'm like, why hadn't I been doing this for before?
It's a risk, right? Everybody thinks of it as a risk, but I
Yeah,
love how you were in a position where all the referrals were actually under your name, right? So
yeah.
for you to move shop, it was very low risk, and I wouldn't say I'm sure you had a ton of extra work and responsibilities now, but it was a very easy transition in compared to other people that are trying to have their own startups. And
Yeah, it was a real paradigm shift in my own head,
I bet,
because up until then, I had only worked for other people,
yeah,
and I thought that was really my only option. I didn't see starting a small business and starting my own
it's scary.
practice. Yeah, it just doesn't. How do you do it?
Yeah,
What do you start with? What do you do?
yeah,
Where do you get the money? And actually, my sister Michelle, she gave me a grant for $5,000 to get some accounting services and start
That's
stuff up.
amazing.
So thankful, because she's an entrepreneur and she's got
Right.
that entrepreneurial spirit. So she thought what I was doing was really cool.
Yeah.
And, and I got a lot of support from people. The state immediately switched all my correspondence to me. And, it was just like, wow, I shifted gears really fast. And once I got that idea that I could do this myself and I can run a business, being a small business owner and manage people, because I had been doing it before,
Yeah.
but I was doing it not under my own business. Once I
Right.
did it under my own business, it really made a lot more sense to me. And I'm 17 years now I've been running my own business.
That's
I just
fantastic.
realized, I'm like, wow. And it's going better than ever. I mean, it just really keeps getting better and better.
I think what's crazier for me is that we've known each other for that long, like
Yeah.
probably longer, and
Yeah.
that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been at it for a while there, Bernard.
I feel like you have amazing job security because, unfortunately, it's a service that people are always going to get injured,
Yeah.
whether it's on the job or
Yeah.
through recreation.
Yeah.
And people are always going to want to find valuable employment.
Yep.
And particularly the space where you're in, where after 120 days, it has to be referred.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that's a really good law. It's a safety net law, because if people, like why we're doing this right now, people
Yeah.
don't understand what vocational rehabilitation is.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time explaining this is what we do. And I'm kind of like in the business of helping people live out their dreams.
It's amazing.
Because what you do for work is part of who you are, part of what you're going to do in your life, kind of what kind of house you're going to have, what kind of cars, all your dreams are
Yeah. People view you.
how other
It's
people
yeah.
view you, who you are, how successful you are.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in the business of helping people live out their dreams. That's how I see it.
I love
And that's what I look for. I go, what do you want to do? If you could do anything, what would you want to do? And then once we get that, the process is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's the same process that you would use in any great undertaking that you would do.
Right.
Like hiking the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah.
1 foot at a time. Don't worry about anything. One
Yeah.
foot at a time.
Just focus
Here's your
on that
goal
next
out
step.
there.
Yeah.
Leave that goal out there. Leave it there. You watch that movie about the walk in the woods guys. Well, they're pulling out the whole map and they went this far and they think, oh, there's no way we're going to. No, you don't ever do that.
Yeah.
You set a goal out there and it's out there. And then you just think the only thing you want to focus on is what's right in front of you and what
Yeah.
you have to do for the next step. And that's what we do for Voc Rehab. It's like, okay, what's the next step? And through doing that, you get amazing results.
Right.
But it's like, just, what is that next step? That one's too big. Let's step it, back and trying that and figuring it out. And the people that we're working with, they learn that. They learn that this is how we do this. We
Yep.
set a goal and it might seem undoable to us now, but once
Right.
we push our limitations, we increase our abilities. We maybe figure out some adaptive equipment, we learn American Sign Language,
Yeah.
whatever it takes, you can do it. So sometimes they do seem insurmountable. And I think that's where the guidance and counseling and the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah. So when you meet a new client, how do you first assess their abilities and their limitations, and then work that into a concrete plan for what to do next?
That's a good question. It's a scientific process. I use a scientific process.
Okay.
What we do is we start with aptitude testing. And this is what the military does. They're very smart.
Yeah.
They test your aptitudes, and the GAPI aptitude test has been normed over thousands and thousands of people. So they can tell by how you score on the test what you're naturally good at.
Okay.
I mean, you got verbal skills, you got numeric skills, you got spatial aptitudes, you got clerical aptitudes. You have all these different types of aptitudes that we look at, and
Yeah.
it measures them. So like what typically I get is a construction guy comes in, he's got great spatial aptitudes,
Yeah.
verbal, not so good, math, maybe okay,
Yeah.
So, and we look at those strong points and then we assess, okay, what kind of training modality works with that person that has those kind of aptitudes?
Yep.
And it's a combination of what they're naturally good at and what they say they like to do.
Yeah.
And what you got to do is get that lined up.
Yes.
They can't say they
Absolutely.
like to do something over here, but they're
not good at
they're
it.
not
Yeah.
good at it.
Right.
That's just the recipe for disaster. When you look at anybody who's successful in their career, they have developed their abilities where their aptitudes are.
Yeah.
And then they maximize their aptitudes to make the most, money they can make, the most progress, the most change in humanity,
Right.
all these people like Elon Musk, and I mean, he's got weird personality quirks, but he's got his aptitudes and
Oh yeah,
his strengths all lined up really good.
that's right.
So anybody who's successful knows their aptitudes and interests lined up.
What kinds of barriers do your clients most often face?
Ah,
Physical, mental health, transportation,
you
and
name it.
how do you problem solve around those?
Well, it's, one step at a time kind of thing.
Yeah,
These processes that we're working through, these services and stuff, there's always bureaucratic, what I call guardrails. Bureaucracy has their guardrails.
yep,
And in the workers' comp system in Alaska, they have their regulations and whatnot. And the regulations were largely written by, I don't want to say business people or more bureaucrats or administrators, but
right.
they weren't written by rehab counselors.
Laws aren't
They're
the
writing the
ones
laws, and they're not the
that know
ones who
that
have to who know
space.
anything about what really they're writing about. So I go into it knowing that, and I look
Yeah,
at the regulations, and some of them are just completely um, deal breakers.
yep.
Like if I told you, Bernard, you can only earn 60% of what you were making when you were injured. How would you feel about that?
Oh, there's no way that
No,
I would
what
be
the-
devastated, right?
That's a
I had a
devastating.
family.
So, but that's in a regulation. So I just ignore those. Sometimes it drives the insurance company nuts that I'm not going to play by those rules, because as a rehab counselor, it's my duty to try to get this person up the food chain as much as possible.
Yep.
This 60% thing, they think it's saving them money. No, it's just devastating. So they run off and apply for Social Security disability once
And
they
so
think that's the reality.
why is the insurance company upset? Because they're going to have to spend more money to help train that individual.
Possibly. And the other thing is they are really skeptical about whether this reemployment stuff really works or
Gotcha.
not.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a pretty, it's like, how do you get person from point A to point B? What can you do with this person? What can you do with that person? And we've kind of developed a dependency on our systems, like
For
Social
sure.
Security disability systems.
Yeah.
And, it's almost, if you want to just live on whatever they're going to pay you for Social Security, then you got to play their game and
Yeah.
act like you can't do any work at all.
Right.
And that's a sad situation. I deal with that all the time because I'm an expert witness for Social Security cases.
Okay.
And younger people are coming in and they're just, I can't do anything. I'm discouraged. I'm depressed. And when you start thinking like that, it just takes over your whole, personality and your mood. And then
Yeah.
you're just kind of self-defeated. And yet you look at the lady I was telling you about that was paralyzed from the neck down, and
Yep.
look at how great she
God, that's
did.
amazing.
And I see a
Amazing stuff.
number of situations like that where they just excel to the nth degree. I mean, because they start working so hard. They know they have a disability, and so they got to work even harder.
Yeah.
And that's what inspires me. I mean, heck, I didn't even think to go start skiing again,
Yeah.
until I saw my son could go skiing, and he's
Right.
sitting down in a sit ski,
Yeah.
and I'm like standing up, and I'm thinking, well, if he can ski sitting down, I can ski standing up,
Yeah. Yeah. And so,
And
for reference to the audience,
right.
Dan's son was in a paragliding accident 3 years ago, and he's paraplegic now, paralyzed from the waist down. So we
Yes.
had that experience at Craig Hospital,
Yes.
where he met his own rehab folk rehab counselor.
Yep.
And yeah, now he's skiing.
Yeah.
Skiing
He's
down the
worked his
slopes of
way.
Van.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's skiing, and he's got his vehicles, and he's got his own house and everything. I
Yeah,
mean, he's
super
doing
independent.
really well.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring, it's inspiring to me, and that I can bring that home to my own family. But
It's
that's what
amazing.
we do. That's what we do for profession,
Right.
is we try to figure out, okay, you lost this aspect of your life, but let's add a whole other new aspect. Let's go in a direction that we can go in, because the human spirit, and this is something that a nun at the Helen Keller Center told me, the human spirit is much greater than what our body or our senses tell us we are.
For sure. Yeah,
And
I
that's
agree.
really a good thing to always remember, is that, we can overcome great obstacles.
And you're trying to tap into that with your client.
Yeah.
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 So, help me understand the dichotomy of the relationships that you have to deal with. So, on the one hand, you've got the client that is trying to get back to meaningful employment.
Mhm.
So you're working with them on the one side. On the other side, you ultimately get paid by the insurance company
Yes.
So now, are you working with representatives from the insurance company
Yes.
on each case? On,
Yep.
hey, you've got to keep paying this person out until they can
Yeah.
get to this position of employment.
Yeah, and it's a very litigious system because there's all these rules and regulations,
Right.
and so there's attorneys involved, and I work with attorneys a lot.
Yep.
Um, and it's kind of like some of the people that work for insurance companies see what I do, and they really appreciate it because they don't want to waste their money. They don't
Yes.
want somebody,
Yes.
out there just using money just because they think they're going to be out there, and then it's all gone and they didn't get anywhere.
Right.
Um, But when they see success and they see that what we're doing is working,
Yeah.
they're behind me. They say,
That's
wow, we're doing it. And so the insurance people really like to see the success. It's just that they got to give enough breathing space to allow that to happen.
right.
Sometimes the regulations are too tight for that.
Yeah.
I'm also working with state administrators who are voc rehab counselors. But the problem there is that they don't pay the state administrators as well as I'm paid, So I've been at this for 17 years, and
Right.
the state administrator may have been in there for 4 or 5 years and they're trying to learn the ropes. And so, um, I feel like sometimes the state administrators have to trust our judgment and
For
let
sure.
us make some calls, and they're getting better at that. I mean, form a working relationship, we have to have trust in each other. We all have the same goals. We want to see people becoming as independent as possible and out there in the workforce as much as possible.
Yeah.
The problem we have is legislators and politicians, and they're all looking at budgets and dollar signs.
Right.
Voc Rehab has said to the money that they put into Voc Rehab, which is largely federally funded, and then the states kick in, is a 10-to-1 payback, meaning every dollar they put into Voc Rehab, $10 in tax money comes back.
Amazing, because you're putting people back into
Yeah, because you're putting people back in the
Yeah.
workforce and they're paying taxes
and they're
again.
not going to rely
They're
on
not just
Social
taking
Security.
Social Security
Right.
benefits and kind of being, dependent on the system. They're
Right.
putting back into the system. So Voc Rehab is a really good investment for,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
society, for the individuals. And most individuals, they kind of think because of that, the way the systems are, like with Social Security, where you have to be eligible for Social Security benefits, which means you can't do any work. People come in, proving they can't do any work.
Yeah.
And so that whole, well, they're a bunch of fakers or they're just waiting for the next paycheck,
Yeah.
whatever, without doing anything. And that's not really accurate. People really like to be productive. People really like to
Absolutely.
do stuff,
Yeah.
is how I see it.
I agree.
And so I think there's kind of a switch where a lot of times the bureaucrats, the administrator, the policymakers see about 80% of the individuals as being overstating and faking it and trying to milk the system, and 20% being legit. I see it the other way
I
around.
think so.
I see about 20% maybe trying to, play the system and try to get something for free, where 80% are really wanting to try to make an opportunity. And so
Yeah,
that's
I
how I
agree.
always present it to I
Yeah.
said, this is an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And I just had one young lady who was, she was a truck driver, and she was always getting the trucks off the trains and under them and all, in the freezing cold in Alaska, and she slipped off the thing and hurt her leg and her back. And now, she used to do medical type of work. And I
Mhm.
said, wow, this is an opportunity for you to get back into the medical type of work, because she was making such good money as a truck driver.
Yeah.
She couldn't go back to the other thing. And a lot of times you have to look at your career in a longer, this is a career track.
Right.
And so you have to take a lower pay initially and
Yeah.
then work your way up. And Voc Rehab counseling is like that.
I was just going to say, I feel like I'm sure a lot of people may be driven away from it initially because they think, okay, when you first start, you don't earn very much
Mhm.
and you're getting state pay. Maybe you get a pension in there, but it doesn't seem very attractive. But
No.
if you look at the path that you've taken and where
Oh,
you
yeah.
are now, I mean, you follow this career path and it's like you're climbing a mountain. And when you get to
Yeah.
the top, it's a great view.
Well, and I think the more success too that you realize in it, it just drives that passion in you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like,
Agree.
wow.
Yeah.
I remember this one guy who was an airplane pilot, and he had crashed and he had a head injury, and they weren't going to get him back they weren't going to allow him to get back in a plane. And he was so devastated. And then we got him a job being a flight simulator training instructor.
Oh, that's
And he
amazing.
moved to Texas, and man, he was making great money again, and he was so, elated. But
Yeah.
he didn't see that when, all he could see was my airplane pilot, and I can't become a pilot anymore.
Right.
So it's those kind of making those connections, and all of a sudden seeing the light go off, and they're like, oh, wow, I'm moving to Texas. I'm going to be doing a flight simulator instruction, program, and
That's
on we go, and make good money at it.
How how does it work for somebody in your position where, you got a federal license, but you spend most of your time in the state of Alaska working through that legislature,
Mhm.
those particular types of that particular type of job market. If if someone in your position wanted to get up today and move to Texas or move to another state, I how, I guess how difficult would that be? How easy would it be? And what would the process look like?
Well, I think, it would be difficult and easy. There would be difficult parts of learning the new regulations that they have because it'll be a little bit different regulations.
Yeah.
Federal regulations would be the same. The Social Security work would be exactly the same.
Okay.
Um, but the state, each state has a different workers' comp type system, so that I'd have to learn the ropes of that.
Mhm.
Um, Having so many years of experience is kind of like, okay, these are the regulations. It's kind of like the framework of that, the guardrails, what we have to stay within. But
Yep.
then how do we motivate the person? And that's really the key factor is you're motivating people.
Yeah.
So that just gets better over time. I
Right.
mean, to me, I'm at the point where I feel like I can really motivate people, uh, being older, being around the block on so many different, jobs and
Yeah.
how it goes ups and down. And, before I used to be more of an activist. I
Mhm.
used to be like, we go to Washington, D.C., and we're going to see our senators and our legislators, or we're going to change these rules and
Right.
regulations, and,
Right.
like the Americans with Disabilities Act and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. I was all into that big time, man. I
Yeah.
was, going down there to Washington, D.C., and I have friends that are still doing that, and
Yeah.
they're still really active on that. And I think that's good because there's two aspects of it. One is you have to change the world to be more accepting and more amenable.
Yes.
And then the other is you got to get the person motivated and get them, to
Yeah.
do, and then you get them both working together and you improve the whole outlook for everybody.
Yeah. And you have to let the world know that people are pushing for this, and that it's an
Yeah.
important topic.
Yeah.
People
You're
actually
always
care about it.
changing. You're always making the systems work better and
Yeah.
not discriminatory and not prejudiced and not,
Right.
because there's a lot of that out there. And we deal with
Absolutely.
that all the time.
Yeah.
And we deal with the prejudice and the perceptions that, oh, this person can't do anything now. Well, they can do a lot. They can do a lot more than you know.
Do you have any stories of people that were, non-college degree workers, laborers that got injured and then ended up getting an education?
Yeah, I have one. I have a couple, but I have one just that's happening right now, and it was a great collaborative effort. Um, I'm trying to think what the guy was doing. He was like a security guard, or
Yep.
he was doing something, not very high skill levels, but he was a smart guy, and he wanted to go to school and do cybersecurity.
Yep.
He wanted to learn computers, and so it was at least a 2-year program and possibly a 4. And in our system for Alaska, we can only send people to school for 2 years. But I was able to get the state of Alaska, the public voc rehab
Yep.
second, to open a case for him and continue his education on.
Yeah.
And so this guy is in his 50s now. Okay, so he's worked all his life doing menial, not very high tech jobs.
Right.
But now he wants to go to school. He been on computers. He was familiar with them, but he wanted to go and become a cybersecurity specialist. And so he took this program at the University of Alaska. And man, lo and behold, so it was a 50-year-old guy with a bunch of 20-year-olds, always partying and having a good old time. And he's just work, 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 work. He's at the top of his class.
Yeah.
He was on the dean's list, left and right.
That's
So
amazing.
I paid for the first 3 semesters because the workers' comp has to pay first,
Mhm.
but then he switched over to the state, which was going to cover his semesters. Well, by the time he got to that level, he didn't even need the state support. He was getting Pell Grants and scholarships,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
was well on his way.
Yeah.
So the state was delighted because they opened the case. They hardly had to put any money into it, and they're going to get a shining success.
Yeah.
This guy's going to be a shining success. He's coming out. He's challenging all his professors, most of them which are younger than he is.
Right. Yeah.
They did some what was it, DEI things. There were
Yeah.
some DEI papers, and he had this purple-haired young lady who was giving him an F because she didn't agree with his opinion.
Yeah.
So he got the head of the department, who happened to be his neighbor, and then met with this lady, and they had a little discussion why he got an F on this paper because they disagreed on the
Yeah.
DEI stuff. And he
But
got
so he's now somebody that, I mean, I can only imagine the multiple he's got on his income now.
Yeah.
from where he was
Yeah.
before the situation. So
Well, and he's a worker. This guy has worked
yeah,
all his life, and he looks at all these young people coming up the ranks thinking, "Oh, everything's gonna get handed to us. We're gonna have the big parties," you know, and he's in there working and doing
right.
twice as hard. And because he was older, like when I went to school, back to school when I was older, I was like, "This is my job. This is my life, man. I am gonna put everything 100%. I
Yeah.
want A's on everything, and if my
Yeah.
teacher doesn't give me an A, I want a good explanation of why." I
You
was
had
the
a
same age
family.
as a
Yeah.
lot of the professors who had never been out of the college system their whole lives. They were
Yeah.
in a university setting.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that aspect of, life is short and you got to really put a lot of energy and intensity into it. You
Yeah.
can't just sit back and think, I'm just going to glide along and everything's going to get handed to me. It ain't going to happen. You got to
Yeah.
make stuff happen. So that's the first thing I tell people when I'm working with them. I go,
Love that.
you're the driver. It's in your position. I said, go down to the job center network, start doing career exploration, start looking
Yep.
at different options that you can do. Don't
Yeah.
just sit back and wait for somebody to tell you something or hand you something.
Right.
That's not going to happen. You got to be in the driver's
And
seat.
they generally respond to that.
They do. They say, "Oh, wow, I didn't think of it like this. I thought my life was going to be over. I thought it was going to be, on
Yes.
Social Security benefits." I
Right.
go, "No, no.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunities out there. Go for it. Do stuff." I had a gentleman, he had a really bad accident. God, he was just really. And then he had a stroke, and then he was getting on the internet, and he was a sports cards collector.
Yep.
And he was collecting really valuable sports cards. Some of them were up like
Oh
$10,000.
my God.
So I was gonna write him a plan to do sports card retail sales. I mean, he
Yeah.
could have done it for a business on
Right.
the internet, just
Right.
right from his home. And he was pretty jazzed about that one. That was a good one.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, that's the kind of things that you can kind of pull out. It's like, what do you do? What do you do? What are your interests?
Yeah.
And, I'm the type of person, I have a lot of interests. I mean, I do
Yeah.
voc rehab because it's paying the bills and I got a passion for it, but I love playing music. I'm a builder. If I took the aptitude test, it would say I should be an electrical engineer or construction superintendent or something because I
Right.
like building things and I have this huge solar collector array going on at my
Yeah.
house, all kinds of electrical battery backup systems
Now you
and stuff.
built your own house.
I built my own
Yeah.
house. I've been living in
On
a house that,
permafrost.
yeah, on permafrost. I just redid the foundation. I mean, I'm constantly building, and I work with the contractors, like right in there with them and
Yeah.
figuring out
Right.
everything that's going on. So I have a very good spatial aptitude,
Yeah.
is one of mine. But in this kind of work that I do, I got to write reports. I got to, justify what we're doing. I got to present plans. I got to convince people. I got to motivate people,
Yeah.
and getting everybody pulling the wagon in the same direction. That's really kind of
What is this aptitude test? Can people take it at home? Just
yeah, it's a GATB aptitude
a
test.
GATB?
Yeah, it's called the GATB,
How do you
and
spell it?
it's GATB,
Okay.
GATB, and
Gotcha.
it's like a multiple choice, timed. It's timed.
Yeah.
That's one of the factors of it is how far can you get through it because you usually can't finish any section.
Right.
But they ask all kinds of questions like, some of them are what's different in this picture, and they have 3 different pictures and you got to figure out what, it's like spatial aptitude things.
Yeah.
Or what does this 2-dimensional pattern look like in a 3-dimensional?
Yeah.
Something that's flat, like, how cardboard boxes are.
Right.
You fold them all up and they're
Yeah.
square or they're triangular or whatever So there's a lot of those kind of questions. It's more like, how does your brain think
Yep.
and process information?
I feel like people should, all kids should be taking this in high school.
Yeah, they should be. Well, that's
what
why
are
the
your
military does it because they
Right.
want to get the best, use out of the people that
the
join the
best
military.
fit. Yeah, absolutely. So for other voc rehab counselors, let's say somebody that's just starting out or later years at college right now or in their master's program, they want to follow this path and get to a point where you've got your own private practice.
Mhm.
Obviously, you need to earn your keep a little bit, pay your dues, and
Yeah.
figure out how the system
Yep.
works. So, what would you suggest for young voc rehab counselors or aspiring ones on what the right career path would be?
Well, I think doing a good bit of time in the public sector
Yep.
is because there you're contributing to society and you're not making as much money. You're on a salary or whatever. You're working for a nonprofit or you're working for a state agency.
Yep.
I think that is a really good experience because I met some really great people working in that situation.
Mhm.
And you just get that perspective of like, okay, this is what society needs. This
Right.
is how you get people up and rolling. And I had such rewarding cases when I did my internship in Anchorage. I remember there was a young deaf gal that had cerebral palsy,
Mm,
and she just wanted to work at this bank so much. And I said, well, she's taking accounting classes. And so the bank loved her. She was just a sweetheart lady. And so I got her in the accounting classes, and then we got her really good looking clothes and stuff, so
yeah.
she looked like she fit right in the office. And I remember watching her one time, and she was walking, and she had kind of a weird gait where she had cerebral palsy, so her
Right.
walk was a little bit off, but she was like dressed to the nines. And I remember watching her walk to work, and she was so proud of
Oh,
herself. And
that's
I thought,
awesome.
whoa, this is what it's about. This is what
Yeah.
it's about.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people take this stuff for granted, but when you have that ability to work someplace that you want to work and you want to make a living and you want to show people you can
It's
contribute to
so rewarding.
society, it
Yeah.
is so rewarding.
Yeah. And
So,
okay, so spend a good amount of time in the public
yeah,
sector.
start with the public
Yep.
sector, work for the states,
Yep.
do the voc rehab that's the states, work like, you could work as an administrator for workers' comp and that kind of stuff because those
Yep.
are voc rehab counselors. And then look at options in the private sector. I mean, some
Yeah.
people, I met a good friend of mine whose parents were deaf, by the way. So we
Yep.
grew up using American Sign Language. Our careers are almost complete reverse. It's interesting because he started out in private voc rehab.
Okay.
And when I first met him back when I was doing my internship in Anchorage, he was a three-piece suit, just a really looking sharp, slick-looking guy. He brought his own furniture, and then he went to work for the state. He got out
Yeah.
of the private sector, went to work for the state. And that's when I was doing my internship, and I worked with him, and then I worked for the state with him. He used to be my supervisor. And then I decided to go into private practice and went from there. He stayed working for the state. He became the state director of Oak Rehab.
No
And then he
way.
just recently
Wow.
retired,
Okay.
and now he's the president of the Alaska Deaf Council, and he's going, he's doing all the advocacy stuff. So he kind of went from the private sector into the public sector and then took that to the
Yeah.
next level, which is I commend him because I don't have the wherewithal to do that. I was
Yeah.
in the public sector, and I thought I got to my limit there, and I had
Yeah.
to go into the private sector
Right.
to make it, what I felt was a decent living. He did the opposite, and he's
That's so
pretty well
cool.
off.
Are there also voc rehab counselors that work for the workers' comp insurance companies as well?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so
There's a
they're on
they
that side as
hire
well.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I used to work with a lady that was a voc rehab counselor, and
Yep.
she was kinda tough.
I
But
bet.
but
Yeah.
and there's big rehab companies. There's like Geneva Woods and whatnot. In
Yep.
fact, I'm just a little company. I'm the biggest one in Alaska, but Alaska's basically a little place in
Yeah.
terms of population and
Mhm.
stuff. So I'm just a small little company, but as potential for my small business, I'm already looking at, these bigger companies might be interested to buy my company out.
Right.
I'm not thinking of selling it, but I am exploring that because I'm getting older and I want to know what are my options going on as a small business owner. Could I
Right.
sell this business? And now I'm finding out, yeah, it's actually worth a pretty good amount.
Yeah.
And I could sell it and, you know, be fairly well off. I'm probably not ready to do that yet, but that's an option. I mean,
Right.
as a voc rehab counselor. So there's big companies that do voc rehab. Uh, there's companies that hire voc rehab counselors to do the Social Security work. And
Mhm.
now I have my own federal contract, so I could
Okay.
actually hire other people to do Social Security work. I don't really want to go that direction. I like actually the direction I've been going in, and this is another aspect of voc rehab. This is really at the high end now that we're talking. So I'm working, workers' comp and stuff. Go the next level up is being a vocational expert witness. Offshoot from the Social Security vocational expert witness,
Yep.
except you're working with attorneys.
Yes.
And I had a couple of really successful cases this year as a
Yeah.
vocational expert witness. I mean, where it was my calculations, my numbers on
Yeah.
lost earning capacity that brought in millions of dollars to the claimants and to the
Wow.
attorneys.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that work is challenging. It's really, kind of it's not clear cut.
Yep.
There's regulations and stuff about what damages somebody can charge in a personal injury case, or like a wrongful imprisonment case,
Yeah.
or like, I had one employer that knew there was asbestos in a building and had four construction well, a safety officer and four
Wow.
construction workers working there unprotected,
Wow.
and they all got fired, and then they blew the whistle, and then they all got blacklisted, and then my attorney friend called me up, and he said, "You want to take on these four guys?" And I interviewed them all,
Yeah.
and they all had very significant lost earning capacity because of
Okay.
that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
they settled out those cases before I wrote reports, and they settled out the cases.
Yeah. Who do you get paid by in that case? Is it by the attorney that's hiring
Yeah,
all this
the
expert witness?
attorneys will
Okay.
hire you because that one case was a wrongful imprisonment case. A young Native guy, he was arrested for murder and spent 18 years in jail, and he was a really bright guy who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But then it came out with the police, coerced confessions, they coerced witnesses, the
Mhm.
whole thing was a scam.
Yeah.
And so 18 years later, he's out,
18
and now
years.
he's not,
Wow.
he's lost the main part of his life. And his cousins who went to Stanford University, because he was of that, Inc., of where he was top of his class and stuff,
Yeah.
they became attorneys, and they're like CEOs of big native corporations making
Wow.
1.5 million a year.
Yeah.
And as soon as I pointed that out to the attorney, ooh, the lights went off, and they
Yeah.
ran with it, and they
All
took
that
it to the
potential lost.
hilt.
Yeah.
They took
That's
it to the
amazing.
hilt. Now, some people say, well, that's not the best thing to do. But for that person, I felt the justice had been done. And I like to see justice to be done.
Yeah.
So people that are wrong, that they're in an accident that wasn't their fault, and now they've got less earning capacity. So I do expert witness work for attorneys. And that's really rewarding to
Yeah.
me to see that justice is done. I make pretty good money doing that. And, I like working with the attorneys that are like that, because they're not, some people say, well, they're ambulance chasers or whatnot. No, they're like trying to get justice in the system. They're
Yeah.
trying to make the
Yeah.
systems work the way they're supposed to,
Right.
because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work the way it was intended to
Yeah.
work.
So if you were to sell your business as a rehab counselor, this is something that you could do um, on the side or post that transaction.
Yeah, or I could train other people to do it too.
Right. Yeah.
And I've got some young people. I've got a young lady who's working with me now, who used to be my bookkeeper, then she got credentials, and she's getting
Oh, no
cases.
way.
But she's starting out slow. She's smart. She's
Yeah.
she's starting out with just doing the eligibility evaluations.
Yep.
And so you can just do those, and that's fine. That's kind of nuts and bolts, check off the box
Yeah.
stuff. And then you can go to the next level, which is writing reemployment plans, which is where you get creative. And I like it because the eligibilities is all looking back at what you did, and do you qualify. Reemployment plans are looking forward. What's your vision for the future?
Yeah.
How do we make something happen here?
Right.
And so that's always, I always like that part of it better.
Yeah.
It's like, let's look forward. Let's look at the light at the end of the tunnel. You're in a tunnel here. We're going to figure out a light and
That's
go for it.
awesome.
Yeah.
How do you see this whole industry changing over the next decade?
Well, I think, with AI, and the whole labor market is changing actually a
Mhm.
lot. The unskilled jobs are going away. They're becoming less and less.
Yep.
And the skill jobs are becoming more. So I think, through AI and through accommodations, I mean, I look at my son, he's doing everything from his home. He can work remotely,
Yep.
with computer screens and AutoCAD and everything. I think it's just going to be better. I mean, it's going to level the playing field. I mean, that's what we need to do, is we need to
Yeah.
level the playing field so more people have opportunity, more things. So the things that I see in AI that are coming out really good is voice recognition.
Yeah.
Voice recognition is getting so good. So that means that a deaf person can put a machine or a computer down, and you can talk to it, and they can read everything you say.
Right.
And then they
Right.
could type, or they could,
Oh, it's amazing.
so
Yeah.
it'll enhance communication skills. It'll help bridge gaps, and provide accommodations, technologically wise. I mean,
So
technology has been our key, benefactor in a
so
way.
so from your perspective, it doesn't necessarily change your job, but it will change the potential for the potential types of work for your clients
Yep.
after
Yeah.
injury.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's amazing. Any changes to your job itself, you think?
Well, I think, this is still people jobs. We have to motivate people. When there's more opportunities, when there's more success out there, then people see, oh yeah, I could see myself doing that. Doing things like this podcast. when did podcasts come about? They've been
Yeah.
around for a while,
Long
but
time.
they have a lot of influence on
Yeah.
people. A lot of influence. They watch a podcast, they go, "I didn't know what that was for."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd like to do that. Or
Yeah.
I didn't know actuaries do that, or
Yeah.
anesthesiologists or game wardens. I mean, all that stuff that you've been highlighting
Right.
are all really cool careers.
Yeah.
And when people in their careers, it's like, what motivates you in life? We all want to leave this place a better place than what we came here.
Right.
It's always improving, and technology is improving. Everybody's what better off. Heck, I drove in a self-driving car the other day. I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing.
A self-driving
It's
car.
so
You didn't have to touch the steering wheel. I mean, the technology is advancing so fast.
Yeah.
It's creating more opportunities. I
Right.
mean, so people that maybe couldn't physically drive before now can get in their self-driving car and go to work or
Yeah.
go do stuff that they never dreamed that they could do. And I think those opportunities just need to be highlighted and talked about. And
Yeah.
and I think this kind of stuff that you're doing, it's like let's shine a light on what these folks do that is working and
There's
making
just so much out there.
There's
Yeah.
so much out there.
I feel like a lot of young people are lost and don't
Yeah,
know what they want to do.
and there's kind of this shift between everybody wants to be in financing or marketing or
a doctor or a lawyer.
or a lawyer and those kind of things. And this, there's a lot of different opportunities. And I think whatever you can do that makes you feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
That's really important. You want to feel fulfilled, like you brought some meaning to the world, to your own life, and people see that, and you're valued for that.
What for somebody that wants to pursue this career, let's take somebody that's in high school or early years in college, or perhaps they're looking for a career change. What's the first concrete step that they should take to become a voc rehab counselor?
Well, I think, you're kind of in that realm of psychology and social work and social services kind of stuff. But the voc rehab counselor is more nuts and bolts. It's more like practical. How do we get you to work? Social worker and psychology is like, how do you feel? Let's make you kind of, better functioning psychologically and more looking up at things and not depressed. And so I think the first step is to probably try a lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I did. I started out as a paper boy, and I was a dishwasher, and then I was a lifeguard, and I think back to all the different jobs. Then I was a truck loading trucks for UPS, and then a sorter, and then, I mean, it just goes on and on. If I think back to all the different jobs, which really kind of puts me out there when I work with the truck loaders, or, I like, oh yeah, I used to do that job. Yeah,
sure.
I used to do that, so try to do a lot of different jobs, experience a lot of different vocational situations, because also I think when you're, plotting out your career, you'll set objectives, what you like. For me, for a long time, my objective was to be a voc rehab counselor for the state of Alaska.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to get certified and on and on. Now, I knew beyond that was the private sector. And so I worked so hard to get that. I did an internship with the state of Alaska. Then I worked for the state of Alaska for about 4 years. And, it wasn't what I thought. It was a little bit more too bureaucratic, too much, of the files, and everything had to look good on paper and all this other stuff, where when I would sneak out of the office to work with a deaf person, I would get in trouble, stuff like that. So I would say be flexible too, because there's a lot of different ways you can go. And in a voc rehab type of career, you can go, a lot of different ways to it, and be very successful with it. And I think in some ways, us voc rehab counselors haven't done a good enough job educating society about what we really do. That's why I took when you said, "Oh, let's do a podcast on what voc rehab counselors do." Oh, I'm there, man. I want to shout it from the mountains that voc rehab counselors are pretty cool people.
Yeah,
and they're doing some neat stuff.
And incredibly valuable when you mentioned the 10-to-1 payout.
Yeah, when you think of the money part of it, you're getting people back into the workforce, and they're generating a tax revenue, which is paying back, and that whole, the whole way it started from the veterans coming back from the war. I mean, they put their lives on the line. Let's provide them a service to get back, be functional again.
Do you still work with service members that come back?
I do.
From deployment? Yeah.
I do. I have a case right now. It's kind of a real interesting case, because it's a vet, and he was able to get vet benefits, but if I had put the workers' comp benefits in with the vet benefits, they would have taken those vet benefits away because it was like an exclusionary type of thing. And he was even homeless at the time, and so the vet benefits came in. They provided the money for housing, on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to school, and I was going to write him a plan for school, but if I had paid for anything in his schooling, he would have lost the vet benefits. So I didn't write him a plan. I just sat back and I watched. I said, okay, you go to school. You're going to go for applied business. You know, he got an associate degree in applied business. Well, he had a head injury, and the head injury made it hard for him to look at a computer screen. And so all this applied business stuff, and I was going to make him a park ranger first, and then a recreational facilitator, administrator, you know, and it was kind of like he couldn't work on computer screens. It was just beyond him. So then he went out and found his own job. And I would have never picked it in a million years because it was like a plumber, furnace repair guy, heavy duty stuff, but he didn't have to look at screens. And so he went and found an apprenticeship job, you know, doing that. And I wasn't nothing I did. He did it all himself. And then I had to go to a hearing with him, and they said, well, has he been cooperating with you, Mr. Labrass? I go, yeah, he's been doing really well. I haven't hardly done anything for him. But then he got this apprenticeship job, and then the insurance company was, well, he's already working. I go, well, he's kind of an apprentice and he's got expenses. So now they want me to write him a plan. The hard part was I had to get a doctor to release him to do this job. And it's a heavy job. I mean, being a plumber is a heavy job.
Absolutely.
And I finally, last October, I got the doctor to release him to do the job. So there's like steps that I got to take.
Okay. So you could help.
So I couldn't help him because I didn't have a release medically for him to do that job, but he was doing it. I'm like, I'm not going to tell him not to do it. You know, he was doing it. And so now he's a year into it. He's got another year. I'm going to write him a plan for a year. And then I'm going to put all the training money that I would have had, put it into tools. Here, give me a list of tools that you need. And so, you know, and there was another guy whose son owned a welding company, and he wanted to become a welder. So I got him on the job training with the welding company that his son owns. And we bought him all the tools.
That's awesome.
You know, so those are the kind of things we do. You just get really creative. There's always a way to skin a cat, no matter what the regulations say. You know, some of them you don't even have to pay attention to, in my view, because they're just game stoppers. Others are, okay, we got to use this, you know, and people are, the bottom line is people are entitled to those benefits.
I usually try to end these podcasts with asking people what their favorite part about the job is, but I don't think I've come across any career that's as rewarding as the one that you have.
It is.
I feel like the work in and of itself and the results you see with your clients is so rewarding.
It's extremely rewarding, and I think the one lesson you get from that is celebrate the victories, celebrate the successes. Because when you do that, and I remember that young lady with the cerebral palsy all dressed in the nines going to the bank. I'm thinking, we got, you know.
That's amazing. Yeah.
There's a one for the team. You know.
Well, Dan, this has been a great interview. I love the insights you've given us, and
well, I
learned a lot.
appreciate the opportunity.
So thank you
Bernard.
very much.
This is a great idea. I think I couldn't have come up with a better idea for doing something that's going to benefit society.
Oh, thank you. Well, maybe we can change the world together.
We will.
Thank you very much.
Good.
What an incredibly fulfilling job. I'm having a hard time thinking of a career that is more rewarding than helping people earn their livelihoods back after a life-changing injury. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dan as much as I did. He had so many inspiring stories about helping people achieve their career dreams. I also loved how he's been able to earn the insurance company's patience and trust through a successful track record of getting his clients jobs that pay as much or more than they earned before their injuries. Amazing how his career began as a part-time job to make ends meet while he was going to school for computer science. If you enjoy this podcast, give us a like and follow. You can also check out our website at htbpod.com to see a database of jobs we've interviewed for already. And if you feel like you have an interesting career and want to tell your own story on our podcast, just go to htbpod.com and submit the form. Thanks again, and see you next week.